All right, this is page 13, The Tragic Abyss. Highlight, but if the chorus and the audience remain on the rim, the tragic protagonist has to descend into the deepest crevices of the universe, into Tartarus, you could say hell itself. Stop. Caught in its depths, the tragic hero can go neither forward or backward. He finds himself in a pit at the bottom of the underworld where gravity is so heavy that nothing can escape. In this no place, this stony cliff, this bloody ground, this blasted heath, this dung heap of this pit for beasts, poets have exhaustively explored the variety of metaphors that can express the absolute of the tragic circle Chora. This place that is the final end of all things. Page 14. The laws of the land dictate that one is in an ultimate situation, that everything hangs on the next few seconds. Highlight. Time has run out, in contrast to comedic time, which is elastic enough to allow sufficient leisure for working things out, or slipping by and evading the consequences. But in tragedy, suddenly no time at all exists, and hence no escape is possible. Stop. When Birnam Wood can be seen coming to Dunsinane, nothing can be done but to arm oneself for a battle one is fated to lose. Highlight, comedy in contrast has recourse to the alternative world, so that instead of heading straight for disaster, one can avoid it long enough to dream up narrow escapes, to dawn at its skies, or leave a misleading note, or hide behind a bush, or go to the forest outside the city and turn yourself into a donkey. But comedy allows you these things, these basically off routes. Like tragedy is a ball rolling down the hill as fast as possible. There's no stopping it until it gets to the bottom. Comedy is like driving a car in the middle of the winter, and you have these rest areas where you can just pull over and wait for the storm to pass. Right? Tragedy, there's no rest areas. There's no stopping that ball. There's no controlling the movement. Where if you're driving a car, even if you don't have a driver's license, you can still pull over and wait for the storm to pass. The prospects of tragedy are so thoroughly unsettling, yet again, one must wonder at our fascination with it. What does the tragic protagonist accomplish in the abyss that is worth our attention? Why do we long for Why do we long for tragedy? Why do we watch it at all? Stop. Is it that we are fulfilled in this glimpse of the irredeemable? Is it that matter itself is a triumph? That we cry out for the reality of blood? That darkness affirms life in ways that light and harmony cannot do? Whatever the answers to these questions, the one thing agreed upon in discussions of tragedy is its effect is strangely therapeutic. As art form, tragedy helps its viewers, not its protagonists, look upon violence and turn away from it freed and content. It enables them to rise from the devastating experience with a sense of having been fulfilled, and liberates them to shape their lives into the wisdom of comedy. Keep going. But tragedy supplies the knowledge with which they shape that wisdom. Without the tragic, there could be no comic resolution. Further, it is important to note that tragedy never simply turns into comedy. If it affects a resolution, as in the Oresteia, its harmony comes about still within a tragic terrain. And that terrain is elsewhere. For the situations and characters of the tragic world would make us see not our own lives, but rather something in the universe that, though it affects our world, has no counterpart in the daily lives we lead. All right, so you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. You look down and you see these rivers of blood, and you see the people jumping off the edge. That doesn't look like your life. That's not something that happens just on the daily where you're just going about your business. But you learn from that. You don't have to experience it on the daily, but you learn from it. And it doesn't ever turn into comedy for the people in the tragedy. Tragedies never turn into comedy is what she's trying to say. But you can turn the experience into comedy. This is what your parents mean by learning from the mistakes. Well, if your friends were jumping off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge? Like, that's really what it means. If your friends are jumping off the Grand Canyon into a lake of blood, will you do it? In this case, no, right? So this is what we mean by learning from the mistakes of others, especially if those mistakes are devastating, like in a tragedy.
I was wondering, like, when you were talking about, like, the red carpet and everything, why I wanted to read it, because I was trying to catch what the thing was so I could read it later. Like, why? But I want to read that. Because you were talking about babies being eaten and stuff. So I was like,
Well, the Agamemnon doesn't talk about it. In fact, the Curse of the House of Atreus is a really old story. You'll actually read the Agamemnon in your senior year with Miss Iskett. And she was just telling me yesterday how everybody was really into the Agamemnon when they were reading it a couple of days ago, because they were on tragedy as well. Well, see, the whole trilogy is called the Oresteia, and it's based off of the name Orestes. Orestes is the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and because his mom killed his dad, Orestes has to go kill his mom to avenge his father's death.
but didn't he kill the daughter?
Right. This is just bad. So even though Agamemnon killed his own daughter for some wind, and Clytemnestra kills him back, it's Orestes' job to avenge his father's death, which means killing his mother, which is the worst sin ever. Matricide, the killing of one's mother. Worst sin ever. So he has to do it. He does it. He's possessed by these things called the Furies, which is like hardcore PTSD in modern terms. Athena, he goes to pray to Athena, and he says, please take the Furies from me. They're making me crazy. We are reading on page, we're on 14 right now, Alexis. But I'm just telling a story right now. So Orestes has to kill his mother. He does. He's possessed by the Furies. He begs Athena to help him. So Athena, in the trial called the Libation Bearers, this is the second book of the Oresteia after the Agamemnon. Well, in the Libation Bearers is when he kills his mom. The Eumenides is the third of the trilogy, and this is where Athena holds a trial, the first, in fact, trial by jury. That's why Athens is the seat of democracy, named after Athena, because it's the trial, so the trial by jury. And Athena judges Orestes basically not guilty of his mother's murder, because he had to do this according to ancient law, right? So then the Furies turn into these things called the Eumenides, and they are taken from Orestes and given a special garden outside the city. That's how, when she says tragedy resolves itself, but in the tragic realm, that's what she means. Like, it resolves itself, but not in a comedy, in a tragedy. Okay, that was a long way of getting about my point. You shouldn't ask very good questions, Gianna. Highlight, is tragedy then simply a vision of human destiny and the dramatization of our dread at confronting it? Stop. Certainly there is a dread that lies dormant at the bottom of most portion of our psyches, suppressed throughout life, since life could not be lived if it were confronted directly. Highlight that. Life could not be lived if it were confronted directly. Stop. It has to do with our being caught in the flesh, top of 15, of daring to exist as a spirit incorporated in matter, of believing in the blind hopes Prometheus planted in the human race. Prometheus is the god who stole fire from Zeus and gave it to the humans, and then Zeus chained him to the side of a mountain and let eagles, actually it wasn't even eagles, basically awful, like, birds. What are the awful birds?
Vultures.
Yeah, like vultures. Zeus thought eagles would be too noble for Prometheus, so like vultures came to eat out his liver every day, and then they restored it at night and ate it out the next day and restored it at night. That was his punishment for giving fire to humans. Uncovered, it reveals itself as a dread of seeing in one fearful instant the Aufklärung. I actually asked the German teacher, Miss Frau Baran, about this. She says it means to light up, to see, basically, the vast distance between temporal consciousness and the realm of essences. Highlight. Yet something in the iconic gaze of tragedy evokes a corresponding image in our depths. For a moment, we glimpse ourselves as full participants within the accused and splendid human race. And for a moment, we see what the gods look on with bright interest and admiration, watching the suffering of mortals that elevates them to an almost godlike standing. Okay, right there after standing, I want you to write the word apotheosis. A-P-O-T-H-E-O-S-I-S. A-P-O-T-H-E-O-S-I-S. And it basically means to elevate exactly what she said here, to elevate humans to a godlike standing. It's already written there for you. All you have to just... To adopt so... You can stop highlighting. To adopt so apocalyptic a vision of tragedy is, of course, to abjure the employment of the word and its ordinary usage as catastrophe, disaster, or personal loss. For if the tragic consists, as I have been arguing, of the experience of the abyss, as if one had fallen into a black hole in inner or outer space, then it would seem unsuitable to speak of even the most severe actual suffering as tragic. If we adopt this distinction, it is with some wonder at how a form so remote and so forbidding has assumed its supreme power over the art of poetry and the lives of mortals. Highlight. The answer has to lie, of course, in the experience of the tragic art itself, which in some mysterious manner is not forbidding, not removed from daily life, but rather lights it up from within. Stop. A clue to the solution of this enigma is offered in Aristotle's doctrine of catharsis, which seems nearer the mark than his frequently cited mimesis. Highlight. To emphasize the cathartic nature of tragedy implies that tragic art accomplishes its task apart from any resemblance to life. That is, if its essence is to be located in what it does, rather than what it emulates, then it is a kind of liturgy, a public ceremony, and its elements have to be assembled in such a manner as in the end to achieve the right effect, or to change metaphors, to make the right kind of compound, a purgative remedy that discharges the poisons afflicting the psyche. Tragedy, then, as we have been saying, would have to be judged by neither its plot nor its characters, but like a cathartic by its results, which we are hazarding affect a cleansing of the soul and a regeneration of the polis city. The tragic effect is absolute and final. Stop. In the margins, I want you to write, tragedy is a detox of the soul. What time do you say this period ends?
56.
Okay. 56? Okay. Okay, so a detox, just like when you're sick, if you're really, really sick, like, okay, if you go to the hospital because you've overdosed, they will give you know what they give you? Charcoal. Because charcoal will make you vomit up anything you've taken. So, that's if you're like lucid, if you can actually know, if you actually are still awake. But they'll give you charcoal because it's a cathartic. It purges up all of the nastiness in your body. So tragedy is the charcoal of our soul. It's the thing we give ourselves when our souls are so dark and twisted. We got to get all that mess out. So tragedy is the detox. As Job laments, what I feared has come upon me. And Oedipus can only stand in stunned silence as the last piece of the puzzle fits into its inevitable place. Okay, we'll stop there. The next video will be starting at the top of 16.